Hey associates, welcome to another mini lecture on technical writing adjacent topics. Today we're touching on something a little bit different, definitely out of the realm, but still important and useful in our daily lives, style guides and brand kits. Now you might be wondering, why do I need to know about branding? I'm not working in marketing, I'm not working in design. And if you're an engineer, a computer scientist, a teacher, really anybody in any profession, understanding these basic strategies and elements of branding can be super helpful because you are a brand. You are both a product and a company in and of yourself, and knowing how you want to be consistently perceived, whether it's online, in interviews, on your application materials, and just as your personal presence, can be really helpful in crafting the message you want people to see.
Oh, hello.
Also, your company has a brand kit and a style guide that, even though you didn't create it, they definitely would expect you to follow, especially if you're creating anything external, so that way they maintain that consistent voice, mission, vision, and branding. So let's get started with a definition of style guides and brand kits. In simple terms, a style guide is like your company's rule book.
The suit shows that we are a force to be reckoned with, a two-person army that plays by its own rules. Once when I say suit up, I wish you'd put on a suit. Just suit it up. Snow suit up. Flight suit up. I penguin suited up. Penguin suited up.
It will outline your brand's voice, what kind of punctuation, how do we name things, just all the rules that go into writing and creating for your company. A brand kit, on the other hand, is much more about the visual elements and will include things like the color palette, the typography, and the logo assets that you're expected to use. First, I'll show you an example from my current university. The style guide talks about the language, what we call things, some of the wording, while the brand kit actually goes through how we're supposed to use our colors, our logos, and all of the specifics. Here are the brand and style guidelines, the identity standards for my current university. And so they have documents going over the general standards, right, assets to download. And so this is like the logo, so people aren't making up their own. And then even information about the brand voice, as well as how to, write specific types, right? One for alumni when we speak to them, versus other kinds of information. And so if we hop into things like the brand standards PDF, again, it's just available to anyone working or creating, official UCCS, content to make sure that we do maintain this kind of clear standard. And so it, is going to talk about how do we use our university name, what is acceptable for all the logos, what about if you are doing a marketing campaign, colors, typography, all of that really goes into this. And so at a glance, right, we have our main color scheme. This is where your company, right, if they really care about and are trying to make a consistent brand, right, they are going to have. Here's the literal colors, the actual hex code that you should type into your, info design platform to make sure you get these specific shades. Here is the typeface that we want to use, all the different variations, and kind of how, why it's going to be used, including some of these aspects for the logo. And then they, kind of go on with our mission, our position, our attributes, right? What we should really be promoting, the way that we create content, our voice, goes all into these brand attributes and our position. So making sure everybody kind of stays on message, and different ways, to explain, right? The brand name. We can call it this or UCCS. We cannot write it or call it any of these other things. That is not us. That is not, acceptable. So don't do it with, right, a very special case only, in this situation. So most of the people will never have to follow that. And so, right, this idea of a brand kit or brand, standards is really just a document that goes through and explains all the different acceptable uses and expectations of the branding, the idea, the colors, the logos, the typefaces, fonts, and how, right, we like things to be written. They even have explanations of, official letterhead, how all of that is supposed to look. Now, they also had this brand voice. So this is kind of more that style guide than the brand kit. And it's really focusing on how do we want to sound, how should things really be written is much more what the style guide is for. And so here's the values, right? Here's what we do. Here are some good adjectives people should say about the brand. So think about what descriptors, what adjectives you want your voice to sound like.
It's gonna be legendary. It's gonna be wait for it. And I hope you're not lactose intolerant because the second half of that word is dairy. No, legendary.
Basically, when people hear you talk, interact with you, see your content, what words do you hope that they associate with you?
Legendary.
And then again, writing guides, right? So the style guide is much more of how do we expect everybody to write when making content for the school. How about another example? I bet you've heard of this company. Let's look at Apple. Apple has a style guide. This document is 228 pages long, and it includes, right, all the stuff that people need when writing and creating content sort of to fill and align with the Apple expectations. And so we have, right, style and usage, various numbers, kind of letters, how we want to write, these guidelines, how do they want units of measure to look in the work, intro, code, syntax, font, and then different styles and copyright. And so as you scroll through, the type of resources, all of that is, contained including lots of changes, right? Keeping track of all of those aspects. And so when you get into like style and usage, again, here's what we expect for numbers. Here are kind of your rules, your standards for various abbreviations, acronyms. Let me go back to the table of contents, and we can kind of jump into some of these things. So here's all of the aspects of how to write. And then, right, when you click on sort of code, font, and text, right, use specifically like this code of font is what they want. It should look something like this. And it tells you this is the correct way we want it. Right, we would not, right, want it to look and be written this way. And so these style guides are really all about telling you how things should look, how things should be written, what you should be creating with your content. Everything that the writers, the developers, really anyone working under Apple needs is outlined in this style guide. So obviously companies use these documents for style and branding. Of course, how available and how strictly you're supposed to follow it in your job is going to vary. But let's talk about style guides and brand kits for personal branding when you're not doing it for a marketed organization. Apply to your LinkedIn, cover letters, projects, and just generally how you interact with other people or move through the world says something about you. Are you extremely direct, witty, maybe more casual and laid back? Those are all elements of your voice that contribute, yes, to your personality, but really that's your personal brand. Your color choices in all of your online pages can also represent your personality or professional approach, while things like typography choice can set the tone for your communication. And when you can customize it. Of course, a lot of these online professional sites give you limited options, so it's always a play-by-ear situation. Be aware of these elements to help you create that consistent personal brand that works harder to show you. Always make everything work hard to communicate what you want it to say to the people looking at your content. Let's talk for a minute about the real, but also not really real aspects of color and color choices. I'm not a trained, artist or graphic designer, so we're not going to dive into the merits or controversies or background of color theory specifically. Instead, as a technical writer and as it pertains to your personal brand, more about the associations we tend to know and learn, general vibe of different colors and how they look together. So, as a technical writer, I do understand and rely on the culturally imbued, learned associations of certain colors, as well as their impact on contrast, bringing the eye to different places, and just playing nicely with the overall information design. Red, when combined with the danger symbol, draws attention and communicates risk to people. But we also know that red combined with a heart-shaped symbol can mean medical assistance, health, or even love. It's all things that we've learned and completely depends on the cultural context. Similarly, green on a product with icons of leaves can draw attention and might trigger something natural or health. But again, that's something that we've learned. And the color of nature doesn't inherently mean green to everyone. Think about folks who are in the desert. Their nature looks very different than a bright leafy green, or perhaps those living in the Arctic Circle. So, when you're picking out the color for your personal brand, do consider what associations or triggers for your target audience and for yourself that color is establishing. Don't worry too much about the personality the color is supposed to mean, and instead think more about the learned symbols and the areas that are meaningful to you and why you are picking that color. The big thing is to pick a color and then maintain consistency across all of your personal and professional branding. So if you pick purple, go with that as the banner on your LinkedIn and your Instagram, maybe as some accents on your cover letter. That will be your color, and you should know and be able to explain why. Maintaining that consistency can help show these are all cohesive, belong to the same person, and that you are intentional in what you decide to design and share with the world. Now moving on to typography, more simply put, typography is choosing what your font you're going to use and what that looks like. The typefaces that you choose, how your actual letters look, can actually go a long way in sharing the personality of you, your personal brand, and that document. When choosing a typography for your personal brand, consider the legibility. Can people actually read it? Will they see what your name is or be confused? How well it kind of plays off and its dynamic with your color choices and the message you feel like it communicates about you. Again, we have learned associations with certain types, and there's growing research that consistently shows styles of letters, how curved, thick, sloped, etc., do elicit specific and more emotional reactions. Last, let's tie it all back into your personal marketing strategy. Again, you might not be a designer, you probably aren't a marketer, but you do need to learn how to present and market yourself, whether it's for a job, maybe you are trying to grow a channel based on your passions, your interests, or perhaps you do want to start up a company of your own. Either way, we need to start with some personal branding, get used to that consistency, and set ourselves up to be perceived in the world. Everything from your social media content to the email signature you have on your professional accounts contributes to your personal brand and can be used to communicate who you are, what you're about, your values, and your personalities to the audience.
It's gonna be legendary.
I'll show you a little bit about my personal brand and how I chose it. First, right away, as a student actually, I chose my name. And I started using that on anything that I wanted to promote as part of my professional kind of look, what my personal brand was. So this Haley in higher ed, as well as grabbing the HYLYB handle on any platform that I could get it, was step number one to bringing all of my brand under one cohesive umbrella. Now, when it comes to a personal style guide, right, and places like Canva is a great place to start creating and just keeping track of your various style guides, and they have a lot of this branding. And so I'll just walk you through some of my things that I've created. I did start, as a student, I kind of adopted this idea of Haley in higher ed was going to be my, kind of personal branding, because I knew definitely as I was in grad school especially that I always wanted to be in or around or like adjacent to higher ed. And so I also, grabbed this sort of HYLY and this sort of Haley in higher ed or in higher ed naming convention across as many sites as I could. And then I, have this little logo that I tried to put different places. I decided on my main color schemes, as well as all of these, fonts, to keep things together. Now, what that kind of can look like, right, as you can also write it up in a little document, which I've started to do is kind of my personal branding, which, someday maybe I try to turn this into kind of a little bigger sort of area. And so, right, you want to talk about, again, what is your vision? What is your mission, of your brand? Have some of that information going. And then when you get right into things like, how about a channel audit, right? What is your actual footprint? What is coming up when you Google, right, yourself? Is it what you expect? Is it what you want? Or is there something about the brand that isn't, aligning? And so here you can see, right, when I Googled myself, all the different places where I was able to, where I'm coming up, and where we see this Haley in higher ed, repeated over and over again, definitely in the ways that I like. And then, related people that aren't necessarily me, but it's good to know that they, come up in that search. Then you can look through all your different channels as well. So in terms of, right, my brand kit, which I'm still, working on, I change it constantly. This doesn't have to be a static thing, but I've sort of come up with these main logos essentially for my personal brand that I want to put on content I create that appear on my, YouTube channel, on my website, on my LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. Voice, right? Again, what kinds of verbs do I kind of hope to be? What do I want to accomplish? And say, right, the audience should describe my brand as, realistic and efficient, but also being thoughtful and kind, right? Those are 4 qualities that I really want to put forward as my personal professional brand. A very realistic, grounded person who's also super efficient, super productive, is really, thoughtful and kind are things that I would like to be associated with and that I try to, embody as my personal values. And then you get into like the colors, right? And so you can kind of think, again, it's more of like, what do you associate those colors with? Not necessarily like, specifics, but what do you kind of learn? So for me, I went with this like dark blue, mainly because it reminds me a lot of kind of like the blue gray before a storm is one of my favorite colors. For me, it's associated with like kind of power and potential, as well as a lot of people, we have a learned kind of idea of sort of confidence, right? Blue is such a common sort of color that we just see it in a lot of kind of calming places. And then, that vibe also can be associated in some circles with like wisdom. The light blue, right, more of like a calming, tranquility, reliability, right? Blue is just all over the place, so we kind of see it as comforting in many ways because it's so everywhere, but then my specific shades, right, and combinations a little bit different. This teal green and kind of natural for my space. We live in the mountains, and so there's kind of that nice, serene, chill, down-to-earth vibe having green because of where I grew up and where I live and kind of the people I tend to interact with, as well as things like clarity. And then these 2 I picked because I do work currently at UCCS, and so when I do especially my stuff, but for my classrooms, I do integrate as just special accent colors, the UCCS gold and black, just to help strengthen that association for my students. So like my assignment sheets and that kind of stuff, often I use this gold and black mixed in with my colors to help them see this is, my class, but at this university. And same with fonts, like trying to come up with these different little fonts. Why? This is as my special typeface, because it's like, teacher's handwriting to kind of have more of that personal touch when, creating content, but only decorative. Monotype, I really like this as my kind of main heading because of that typewriter, printing press, my background, coming from studying journalism, media, video, movie scripts are still written in monotype. And so that speaks and says something, right, about my interests, my values, and my background. And then I just went with a very modern kind of tech digital focus, Inter or Roboto as backup there. And all of that, and then I take some time to sort of figure out what is it that I want to post, why would I post, right? I don't want to just put content out there for no reason, but all of that kind of goes into that personal brand. And so it can be good to take a minute and just come up with your personal brand kit, right? What is the image that you want to put out into the world? So there you have it. Some benefits and aspects of style guides and brand kits for people who do not work in marketing or design. We can use these elements to build our professional and our personal brand, so that way our messages are consistent. We use every opportunity to communicate something more about ourselves, and we just come across as a lot more intentional and thoughtful. Thanks for tuning in. Excited to see your personal brands. Thanks, associates. Vibes. You know how that applies? I have my primary website, which is follows the HYLY brand as well. I do need to do a little bit of updating where we see some of these blues, and grays in my color palette. I should really update that. You know what? Making this video, I'm realizing I really should actually update this with some of the new changes that I've made. Absolutely want to do that. So I made a note to self, update this. But then we see right on my LinkedIn, following that same kind of branding of HYLYB, right? We see my little logo file there, my main photo is showing up. And so I've tried to kind of put this idea all across the board.